Ralph Peters is joining us on Up Close this morning, and he is with the Family Violence Intervention Program or Project. He's their executive director, and I've known about this program for many, many years now. I currently sit on the board of directors, and I want to bring more attention to the program and what it does and its help with the domestic violence situation, if you will. So first off, Ralph, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I want to talk with you. A lot of people have a lot of confusion over how people stay with someone who abuses them, whether it's physically, emotionally, sexually. It's very hard for people in this day and age, and they don't understand why people, how come they just don't leave? But it's very complicated. There's a lot involved, correct?
There are about a dozen different reasons why women stay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all very psychologically sound, strong, not sound, but strong reasons that keep them there. Very frequently, it's family tells them, you know, it's your bed, you made it, now you lay in it. Don't come to us for help. Very often, religious clergy will tell them, be a good wife. Do what he wants you to do. Jesus don't like divorce. But that quote, which is in the book of Malachi, it says God doesn't like divorce, but he likes even less men who clothe themselves in violence, is the next sentence.
Wow.
And many of the preachers forget to say that part.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they stay makes it much more dangerous for them, because domestic violence is a pattern of behavior. It's not an individual crime. It's not a man hitting a woman. It's a man living in a house controlling that woman's behavior, and he does what's necessary to control it. And if she doesn't let him control it, he will end up killing her.
I think that's how people think about it. I think they think about it as isolated incidents where a man might be violent with a woman, but it's so much bigger than that.
That's correct. It is. It's been a plague in society probably since Cain killed Abel.
Mm-hmm.
Domestic violence has been around for many, many, many years. So,
what is the goal for a man who is in this situation? He wants to, and I mean, we do have some women who are batterers. It's about control?
Correct. It's about power and control. He wants to control her behavior. He wants to control her life, and will do anything it takes to accomplish that task.
And do we know why it may be that this person wants this power and control?
Very often, it's the way they grew up.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way their dad treated their mom, their grandfather treated their grandmother, their uncles treated their aunts. It's a continuing pattern of behavior that passes from generation to generation.
So if you're in this situation, you may not have any idea how to get out of it.
Correct.
Okay,
and there are some good programs, particularly here in Lafayette. Faith House is probably the premier domestic violence battered women's program in the state.
Now, you can go to Faith House. You can get help there. You can always go back if you want to go back. But what Family Violence Intervention Project is trying to do is work with the abusers. So
Correct.
Explain to us what happens with this.
We provide the courts in Lafayette, the Batterers Intervention Program is the technical term. It is a 26-week course that teaches men, and unfortunately women, we do have a women's group, how to live in a nonviolent relationship. We use the 26-week model, the Duluth model. There are 3 national models, and we chose that one back in the 90s because it seemed to have the best tested results.
Mm-hmm.
We started it in the very early 90s, and it has continued and grown. I mean, I remember back in the beginning, we had volunteers that went to court and signed clients up. I was actually one of the volunteers when I was a police officer. We hired a executive director, part-time at first and then full-time, and have grown from one class to we now have 6 classes. We have 5 men's group and 1 women's group.
Mm-hmm.
The program is funded by the contributions they pay to go to these classes, the clients.
Mm-hmm.
The court sentences them. In city court, the average sentence is 120 days for a domestic abuse battery,
mm-hmm.
and they suspend all but 48 hours because that's what state law says. And they put them on probation, and the condition of their probation is to come to our batterers intervention program, which allows them to suspend the sentence. State law says that the sentence cannot be suspended unless the defendant goes through a batterers intervention program, and state law requires that to be a 26-session program.
So then they come to this program, and they don't have to do the jail time, provided
correct.
They are following the rules.
That is correct.
Okay. The Family Violence Intervention Program is something that people may say, well, wait a minute, how does that work? You mentioned something very important, and that is the people who are in this 26-week program, these individuals have to pay for the course themselves.
That is correct.
Now, what's the thinking behind the Duluth model, or why is it that works that way?
Duluth model covers 8 themes, and I have given you the power and control wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually 10 themes, but 8 of them are covered in the power and control wheel
mm-hmm.
that are very common practices in domestic violence.
Tell us what some of those are.
Using coercion and threats against a woman. Telling her if she doesn't do whatever,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to take your kids. I'm going to beat you up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So they will do that to get whatever they want.
Absolutely do that. That is the first part of domestic violence is generally verbal abuse and emotional abuse.
Okay.
Before it becomes physical or sexual.
Okay.
Intimidation is another tactic where they intimidate the woman, physically intimidate, walk up to her and puff the chest out
mm-hmm.
and tell her how life's going to be. And then using emotional abuse. You're fat, you're ugly, you can't cook, you're a terrible mother.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes you. I'm the only one that'll ever have you.
So these are things that spouses will say to
if you
their
ever
partner.
leave me, nobody else
would
will
want
take
you.
Correct.
Wow. Ralph Peters, who is the executive director of the Family Violence Intervention Program here in Lafayette, is joining us to talk about some of the many things that abusers will use as their way to gain power and control. We talked about coercion and threats. An abuser will intimidate their spouse. They will use emotional abuse by putting the woman down. What are some of the other things that will happen in this cycle?
Isolation is
isolation.
A huge tactic where the batterer doesn't let her go out with friends, doesn't let her go visit her family, doesn't let her family come visit her, and just generally keeps her out of society's eye so that society can't see what he's doing to her. And that's a huge tactic. I mean, if you get eliminated or if your support system gets eliminated from you, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do to help yourself.
I would imagine not. So this person will isolate you from your family and friends. Do they tell things about you? How do they, or did they just use any way, any means?
Your mama's not coming over.
They'll just tell that person straight out.
You are just not going to your mother's house. That woman don't like me. That woman don't like our kids. You are not to go over there anymore. And if you do, I'll leave you. Or if you do, I'll beat you up.
Wow. So that's how, and then eventually those people,
those people get isolated.
Wow.
I remember back in the early 90s, I got a call. I was the patrol division commander here in Lafayette, and I got a call from a gentleman who said that he suspected a woman had a problem, that the woman had gotten divorced from the guy, and the guy is back with her now, and that she told him that she was very afraid and he was keeping her locked in the house. When he called me, he gave me the address, and I sent an officer over. I sent one of our field training officers with his rookie over there. They talked to the woman, got her out of the house, brought her to the police station, and she was petrified. I mean, wanted to get out so bad, didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
This guy would lock the doors. He nailed the windows shut. The doors had double-keyed deadbolt locks on it, and he took the key. He even put a sand pit at the back door.
Oh, my Lord.
So that if she walked out, and he leaned a rake up against a tree near the end of the driveway, if she walked out, she would have to step in the sand pit, and he would know that she left.
That's diabolical. So he would lock her in her own house.
Absolutely. And she, we got her to Faith House. Faith House got her out of state, I believe, put her in a shelter in Texas somewhere. And we even sent the officers back to get her purse because she left without her purse. And we told the husband that she had witnessed an accident on Mall Street, and we needed a statement from her, and she needed her driver's license. So he had no clue what was going on until it was too late. She was already gone.
Wow. So you had to go to those means to be able to save this woman.
And that was because a concerned neighbor, an elderly male, communicated with her at a grocery store somewhere. While she was with him, she wandered off in the store and told us this older gentleman what was going on, and he called us, and we reacted.
I mean, it sounds like you're reading the script from a movie, but these things happen. This happened here.
This happened here.
So this man locked this woman in her own house, and
that's correct.
The nails, there's nails in the windows.
That's what I would call isolation.
Gosh, my God. That's unbelievable. And put sand outside the back door.
Put sand outside the back door. It looked like a kid's sandbox.
Oh, my goodness. Just to be able to control, have all the power and control.
Just to be able to know if she'd left the house.
Wow. So, boy, gosh, that's crazy. That's the strangest form of isolation that I would even go to in my mind when I'm thinking of this. Because I'm thinking, okay, he just says you're not going to go to your mom and dad's house like you were saying, but I mean, really physically separating that person from the rest of humanity.
And that's exactly what that man was doing to that woman.
It's almost unbelievable. It's crazy. Have you encountered a lot of things like this over your years?
A few
that have been this drastic, I guess. I don't want to minimize any other experiences for any other people, but this does seem even more over the top than what I would have thought. There are more stories, though. I see your mind churning.
I remember one. The director of Faith House called me. I was I don't remember if I was a patrol commander or the CID commander. And she said she had a victim that needed some help, and could I come talk to her? So I went there and I talked to this woman. She was from New Orleans. Mm-hmm. She was a surgical scrub nurse with a very good income, had her own condo in New Orleans, and was dating a contractor, a fairly large contractor, who began the isolation and the verbal abuse. She comes home one morning because she was working a night shift and there's a gate at the front that she opens. It goes through a little garden and then into the condo. And as soon as she gets in the condo, she unlocks that door, and her cat is dead on the floor with its internal organs removed.
Oh, my.
She packed her bags and got on the interstate and headed west and stopped in Lafayette because she figured she could get some help there from a battered women's program. and found her way to Faith House, and they called us. And although no arrest was ever made because she wasn't going to stay around and file charges, she was very, very fearful that he would kill her. We got her out. Faith House got her out and sent her to another state somewhere. And last I heard, she had gotten a job at a hospital. This was up in the Northeast, working up there. But this woman was so afraid, she didn't want us to run his name through NCIC because he had connections at the FBI, and they would know.
Oh, my.
And they would tell him. That's her story, and I don't doubt that could have happened.
Right, right. These individuals go to such extremes to dominate someone.
Some of them do. Some of them go to very deep, dark extremes to isolate people and to control their behavior.
All in an effort to feel like they're in control.
All in an effort to be in control.
Wow.
That's correct.
So why is it, I have always heard the statistic, and I've talked about it many, many times that I can remember, that the most dangerous time for a woman is when she is leaving. Now, if I had been this woman, I would have gotten in my car and I would have left too, to think, oh my God, if he killed my pet, he's going to kill me next. Why is that so dangerous?
Because he is losing control when she leaves.
Okay.
And that's what his intention is, to maintain control over that human being, over that human being's behavior. And when she makes the effort and takes the initiative to leave and get out of the circumstances, he's losing control, and he's going to do whatever he's got to do to get the control back, up to and including killing her.
So these situations where people are involved in domestic violence situations, do they always turn to violence, or will it just eventually lead there and then death if you stay long enough? Or what do we know?
We know that it does increase in severity and frequency over time.
Okay.
It does not always necessarily lead to death. It does in way too many instances, but that's not the general rule, I would say. Although Louisiana, since they've kept the statistic, has been in the top 5 of women killed by their intimate partners in the country. But it does not necessarily always lead to death. It does increase, as I said, in severity over time. The violence, the verbal abuse will become emotional abuse. That will become physical abuse and even sexual abuse.
All in a committed relationship, or what they think is a committed relationship.
Yes.
So everything about this person is violated by this abuser.
That is correct. He controls her whole behavior, and the kids too. He controls their behavior.
Ralph Peters with Family Violence Intervention Program joining us to talk about a variety of different issues in relation to domestic violence and the Family Violence Intervention Program, which is a program where the abuser is taking courses, 26 different courses, in an effort to try to rehabilitate them, to make them understand their behavior so they no longer are being an abuser or trying to learn steps on how not to do these things. We're talking about some of the things that happen. I was asking before about, does it always lead to death? Does it always ratchet up or ramp up? So my next couple of questions are going to be about this idea that how do people get into this situation? And when they do get into the situation, do all of these steps come into play? I mean, what if a woman is in a relationship and everything seems fine, and then one day it's not fine?
The definition of the battering relationship is a pattern of behavior over a period of time. We see on rare occasions, coming from either Lafayette City Court or Lafayette District Court, men and many times women who were involved in a one-time incident. Domestic violence is not anger out of control. It's not a guy coming home and he's mad at the wife because she spent too much money and the argument gets physical, and he pushes, slaps, punches her over that. But he's never done that before, and he'll never do it again. That's not a batterer. That's not a battering relationship. And that happens a lot in society also. But generally, the police don't get involved in that. You know, if the woman has never been hit before, she's probably not going to call the cops on the first time. Probably not going to call them on the second time. We very frequently don't get involved in that until the battering relationship has been established and have been repeated incidences of verbal, emotional, physical abuse, and even sometimes sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. So the batterers we get, the overwhelming majority should be considered batterers because they're practicing a pattern of behavior of control.
Okay, so it is about that pattern of behavior of control.
Correct.
And that's what we need to really learn as people in our state to get a better understanding of what's happening with this.
That's correct.
Okay. We were referencing, and you mentioned the statistics about us being in the top 5 in terms of death, that abusers are killing. In most cases, women. Why do you think that is in Louisiana? Why? What is it? Is there anything you can pinpoint or experts have pinpointed to tell us why Louisiana ends up seeing more women killed in these domestic violence situations?
If I could answer that question,
mm-hmm.
I'd be very rich because we would do what we could do to stop it.
Yeah.
I really can't put it into words why women are more likely to be killed in Louisiana than most other states. It's just a fact of life, and it happens. Mm-hmm. I guess because Louisiana is not far behind the rest of the country in terms of handling domestic violence. Then State Representative Mary Landrieu in 1982 had passed or had authored and passed the Domestic Abuse Assistance Act, which mandated police to make arrests, which created the temporary and permanent, temporary protective orders and the protective order system. That was done in 1982, and in fact, the rest of the country, or 38 states, responded to a court case called Thurman versus Torrington, which, by the way, Tracy Thurman's story, A Cry for Help, is mm-hmm. a great movie. And that's the case that was based on. Mm-hmm. Young lady ran away from home from Torrington, Connecticut, ran down to Florida, fell in love with, married, got beat by, got pregnant by, kept getting beat by. Mm-hmm. Buck, her husband, she leaves and goes back to Torrington, and Buck, being the dutiful father and husband, went to Torrington to find her mm-hmm. and continued to harass her, even though she did everything
by law
she
that
could.
She could do.
She got a divorce. She got a restraining order. She did everything she could do. And Buck shows up one day at the house and stabs her about 40 times.
Mm-hmm. And miraculously, this woman lives. That's why we have the case Thurman versus
Correct.
That town.
And she won a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
They reduced the judgment when the city of Torrington agreed to provide training to their police officers on domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And that started the trend to states to require police to make arrests, require police to be trained in domestic violence, mm-hmm. and all those other issues.
Now, what year did you become a police officer? In the 70s?
1973. January 1st, 1973. Although the city says I started on the 2nd.
So it's been decades of different approaches, changes, understanding.
Let me tell you a very early experience.
Okay.
My second or third night out of the academy, mm-hmm. we were working 3 to 11. My training officer and I made a domestic call, mm-hmm. oddly enough, in the neighborhood where I ended up buying a house. Mm-hmm. And the training officer says, I'm going to take him outside and you talk to her inside and then we'll convince one of them to leave, and we'll leave. And I'm in the house talking to her, and the fight starts outside. I hear that, and I run out there, and I tackle a guy, and I get the handcuffs on him. My training officer says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm arresting him." He said, "For what?" And I said, "Why are you fighting?" He says, "I'm just showing him how the cow chews the cabbage and why he should leave."
Wow.
And that's maybe not in those terms, but
Right.
that's not what police officers did in domestic violence cases.
And that was the understanding at that point.
And that was the common practice.
Right.
To go in, restore order and peace, and convince one of them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the man.
But then time after time after time, you'd keep going back to the same places and the
Right.
same addresses.
That is.
Was that your experience?
We would go to, we'd go to the same houses a lot. And I remember one night I got a little frustrated. When I get there, they were both duking it out. And I arrested them both, called for another unit to transport her, and I transported him, which was not the right thing to do. But arresting him would have been the right thing to do.